Hey everyone, welcome to our Asset Management Friday segment of the Passive Income Through Multifamily Real Estate podcast. I'm your co-host Kyle Mitchell, also joined by Gary Lipsky. This segment is focused on educating operators, building better systems, and becoming a best-in-class operator. Also be sure to check out our Facebook group, Passive Income Through Multifamily Real Estate. All right, today on the show we have Justin Fraser. Justin, how's it going?
Guys, thanks for having me. I love the whole message of asset management and operations, so I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, we know you're heavily focused in that as well, so excited to have you here. If you can tell listeners a little bit more about yourself and what you currently do.
Yeah, so I am a multifamily syndicator and asset manager. We just closed on our largest property yet, 336 units, putting us over 1,000 in our portfolio. So work with some really great partners, and my job day to day on the team is asset management. So I focus on writing the business plan and running and executing it so that we can deliver results to our investors and make the property a great place to live for our tenants and residents.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Justin. Let's talk about hardening your asset. What does that mean to you and why is that important?
Yeah, so hardening your asset, and all of our assets are really C-class assets. And, hardening assets, when you first think about it, you think, maybe I need some thicker drywall or like units that are really tough. But I'm a believer in that the best way to harden your asset is through operations. And so you harden your asset by, and what that means, by the way, is that you're taking it so that any one tenant can't really hurt you all that much. It's sort of like a loss prevention. Any one tenant can only mess up a unit so bad, but we want them to be great qualified tenants before they even get in the door, which is the best way to prevent them from messing up your units and to keep your asset strong.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great example. Thank you. What could you explain maybe a couple other ways you do to harden your asset?
Yeah, so we focus on units, exteriors, and operations, right? So the units is the first level where we're going to put in. We don't put in, for example, appliances that have glass top stoves because tenants tend to drop things on those stoves and they break and they're very expensive to replace. So we do things like that. From the exteriors, we want a place that is a place that great quality tenants and residents want to live and feel part of the community. So we invest in things like lots of lighting, right? Lighting for me is probably the number one way to harden my asset because a bright place to live is a place that many great people want to be. And if you're a tenant that's maybe doing some shady things or selling things you don't want people to be selling on your property, they don't like the well-lit spaces. And so for me, that's like the number one thing. We brighten up every asset that we have with a whole bunch of exterior lighting. And then through operations, we have a lot of strong policies in place, not only in tenant screening, but in reporting from our property managers, in the way that we visit the properties, the frequency that we visit the properties. So all that combines to making sure our assets are as strong as possible.
That's great. So what are some examples of what could happen when you don't harden your asset?
Oh man, all the worst. When an investor asks you on your deal and you're raising money, they say, "What's the worst that can happen?" All the terrible things are if you don't harden your asset. Right? You have tenants that are attracting crime. You have safety issues is another huge thing. We invest right up front in every safety issue or perceived safety issue on the property. Lighting is one example, but trees that are overhanging roofs, staircases that are wobbly or rusted, anything that a tenant could slip on, fall on, cracked sidewalks. These are the things that we want to take care of right away so that we prevent or reduce the likelihood of lawsuits and trouble with the tenants.
So this is for those data geeks out there. Are there any data points you use to come up with, your plan to harden your asset?
I mean, look, we actually look at a few things. So one is totally exterior to the property, which is crime stats. So we will look at the crime that the police department is reporting on for our property. And so we look at before we close. It's something that we monitor through the whole DD process. And then after we close, every month we get crime reports. We obviously want to see that shrinking. The other thing long-term is our repairs and maintenance costs. Because on our properties, we're investing heavily in renovating and making them tenant-proof as best as you can, hardening those units. We see very, very low repair and maintenance costs because it's important to invest that money up front. One of our properties where we've gone through a heavy renovation program, I mean, we're seeing like next to nothing the last 3 months on one of our properties, almost no repairs and maintenance budget because we did it right a year ago, and it's paying off now.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Sometimes hardening your asset means spending more money instead of, taking the cheaper route, So talk about the mindset you need to have here.
Yeah, it comes down to doing it right, and that's really where we start with what is the right way to do it. We don't try to cut corners. We don't try to skimp out. If we're evaluating, and that comes before you even buy the property. So if you're evaluating a deal, we put the money in the CapEx plan at the very start. We invest in cutting down the trees so that you have a sight line, clear across the property. We invest in the lighting. We invest in all these other things that, you could probably get away with not doing. And you're not necessarily going to see a straight, dollar for dollar improvement like you are when you renovate a unit. But the extra investment goes towards the overall appeal and attractability of the property, the ratings that you get on Google, the length of tenant stays, and how willing they are to accept your rent increases. Because if I'm cleaning up everything else about this property, a tenant's much more likely to accept my $20, $30 rent bump than if I'm not taking care of anything else. So we believe heavily in investing upfront, not wastefully, but deliberately, intentionally. And at the end of the day, our measurement is this the right thing to do? Then we're going to plan for it, and we're probably going to do it.
Totally agree. I love it. I'm going to pass it off to Kyle to bring us home.
All right, Justin, what is your asset management superpower?
Man, I think that my superpower is relationships, and having relationships with as many people as possible is really the key, because for me, information is the most important thing to have in asset management. So I want information about my properties, how they're performing. And that's not necessarily through a formal report that comes from my regional manager. I want my maintenance guy to feel comfortable pulling me aside when I'm visiting a property and saying, hey, man, this is what I'm seeing or hearing, or we're not getting the support we need. And so the relationships that I'm able to build with every single staff member when I visit a property, I always bring donuts or snacks, like whatever I can do to just build that relationship and get one piece of information from them on a side comment is going to actually, I've seen in the past, opens up doors, changes how we build our business plans. I mean, the site staff is absolutely critical to have strong relationships with. So I really pride myself on the relationships I build with every member of our property team.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on and talking to us about hardening your asset. I completely agree. One thing Gary and I focus on heavily when we take over any property is the deferred maintenance, which is essentially what you're talking about as well. And it's just so important to get things off on the right foot. So thanks for coming on. If you could tell the listeners where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, I'd love to. Please check out my podcast, True Multifamily. It's on every major podcast platform. We speak about not finding the deal, not raising the money, but the hard part of executing the business plan after we close. We have great people who share a lot of awesome stories. Kyle has been on, shared an excellent story for us. And so we would love to see you guys on the podcast.
Perfect. And then everyone listening in, thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, head over to iTunes and Stitcher, give us a like, subscribe, and review so we can continue to grow the audience and reach more people. We'll talk to you all next week. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in. We really appreciate your support. If you're interested in learning more about APT Capital Group and speaking to someone on our team, click on the link and schedule a call with us. We're here to help, and we'd be excited to speak with you and get to know more about you and your goals. Talk to you soon.